Sorry, we had a little trouble starting in the beginning. But do I have any avid runners here? And I hope I'm not the only one, because I will brag. Nobody?
Well, my running is on and off, but I can't say it like I've gotten far. I've gotten up to like 4 miles, but nothing extreme like 150 miles across the earth. No, I haven't gotten that far.
Yeah, I definitely haven't gotten that far either. That is a lot, and I want to know, like, how do you even cope for that mentally and physically to run 150 miles? So I've been involved in like running challenges for like the last, I guess, year or so, but never to the extent where it's like 150 miles. I think the most that I've done in a challenge was like 54. I'm like on my way to 62. So, look out for that. I'm sure any other runners understand how hard it is to be disciplined. But moving on to the documentary, before we get started with our discussion, I'm just going to do kind of like a recap of the background information. So the documentary really highlights national monuments, and the Antiquities Act of 1906 that was signed by Theodore Roosevelt preserves historic landmarks, prehistoric structures, and other objects of scientific interest for the conservation of heritage, and also just for land in general. And also the federal government owns roughly 640 million acres. About 28% is public land. 28% of the 2.27 billion acres of land in the United States is owned by the federal government. So we have 4 major federal land management agencies that administer over 606.5 million acres of this land. We have the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Park Service, and also the Forest Service, which is under the Department of Agriculture. And since the Antiquities Act has been implemented, presidents use different approaches based on their political party and just also based on their political background in general. For example, I mentioned before, Barack Obama is deemed the president that has designated the most national monuments. He designated and expanded over 34 national monuments. He provided permanent protection for at-risk land and ocean areas, as well as expanded the diversity of our system of public lands by protecting historic and cultural sites. Donald Trump, on the other hand, his administration, soon as he took office, actually, he began opening up public lands to the energy industry. His former Secretary of Interior, Ryan Zinke, he oversaw reviewing national monuments, streamlining oil and gas industry permits, opening Arctic waters to drilling, and shrinking 2 monuments in Utah. So as I've shown, presidents have different approaches based on their backgrounds. So with that being said, does anyone have any reaction or oral reaction that they would want to say about the video in general? And you can just unmute yourself.
So when I was watching it, it kind of makes me like think of, when we say like hiking is a white person's like activity, like what she was doing during the I had to step out, so I kind of caught bits and pieces of it, but what she was doing was kind of, I don't want to say heroic, but kind of like it's something that's not standard, and she's kind of going against what's in our community, but also kind of like this quote here where it says that Black people are treated kind of rather cruelly and unwelcome. I kind of wonder how how she continues to go through that over and over again, or does it like weigh her down?
Yeah, she did have kind of like a resilient spirit in regards to Black people not being welcome in certain spaces, as you said, as far as hiking, just wildlife in general, how she handles that pressure. That's interesting. Any other people want to comment on their reaction to the documentary before we move forward?
I would. Um, One quote, and I can't remember when it was. It was about conservation of public lands as a national heritage, and you hear that a lot, and then it makes you question that very concept of heritage, of whose heritage that is, because one thing you may see, if you're not from the South, is that conservation of public lands is tied to a different, a specific perception of what national heritage is. But then when you come to the Southeast and you start interacting with 1890s and some of the other, I would say, USDA personnel that have come from the 1890s, you start to see another perspective. When I came down here, I think most of the foresters and Forest Service personnel that I've interacted with have been African American. But on a more of a national scale, or when I've heard more about conservation of lands, so I'm from the East Coast, you don't see Black faces in that space. So I guess it's a comment, but it's also a question to the audience too. When you think about conservation of public lands and national heritage, what pictures come to mind? What people come to your mind?
I'm glad you brought that up because we're going to talk about that as the discussion moves on. Basically, what's the difference between like white spaces as far as the environment and Black spaces as far as the environment goes? So I think that is an interesting point because a lot of the times you hear, like I love to hike. And a lot of the times you hear like, oh, Black people don't hike, or Black people, of course, the most infamous, oh, Black people can't swim, So I think that is interesting. And we want this discussion to kind of create a better narrative than how do we kind of change that narrative that Black people don't like to engage with the environment, because that goes against what we were, I guess, inherently made to do or built to do. So that's interesting. Thank you, Dr. Shange, for that comment. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Kayla Peterson. I'm from Texas originally, so I grew up kind of in the South in the country. So I've kind of lived this paradox in my life that I grew up, around rivers. My dad taught me how to swim. He, was a swimmer, lived on the coast, always been around nature. So it's been interesting as when I've worked in environmental spaces and had white people or other people doubt or assume that I don't have knowledge or skill in environmental settings. So it wasn't until I interacted with other people that I realized, oh, I guess I don't belong here. I'm not supposed to belong here. And then also moving out of Texas and moving to other states, meeting people from other states, realizing that, depending on where you live, you don't have that access. So it really is, it hinges on access and who has that ability to exist outdoors safely. And I feel grateful for, my personal experience, but a lot of people don't have that access even today, whether it's financial or just physically reaching those outdoor spaces. So that's kind of a paradox that I've struggled with myself growing up in a region with a lot of nature and a lot of outdoor space.
Yes, you hit the nail right on the head when you said who can be outside safely. I can recall a documentary that I watched last week when they say that Black people didn't want to go into the forest because when they were there, they would see noose hanging around. So, like, of course, you don't feel safe or you don't feel welcome because you're fearing for your life in that regard. So, yeah, that's definitely a great point. Thank you for sharing, Kayla. Is there anyone else?
Hi, I'd like to comment. Hi, everyone. Patience on Kayla's point on the validity of lived experience growing up in nature and having that experience kind of outside of an academic space, which most people need to feel quote unquote respected in nature, right? You need to be a field researcher. You need to have your notebook. You need to be out there for a purpose for the world or people in a community to see your presence there as valuable or necessary. But just having experienced people in the South, like I know when it's gonna rain, or just being able to have that, as you've been talking about, a legacy of history, of cultural importance, and that also being very valid, even outside of the sense of academia and what it means to be knowledgeable about our environment. And I feel like holding on to that is so crucial.
No, yes, Patience, I definitely agree. And that's why it's interesting because you'll hear people say that Black people have this disconnect to, I guess, national monuments or like park services, national parks. But also we are built to withstand, I guess, or our culture is built to withstand environmental challenges. We, like you said before, we can smell when it's about to rain outside, like that. So it's hard to say that people that they're not in the environment can't understand how it is to interact with nature. So I think that it brings me back to our initial point, like what's the difference between what's considered a Black space and also what's considered a white space, especially in regards to the environment. Because from this documentary, you can see that the national monuments that they traveled were beautiful, right? But then I'm always outside in the South at the farm, and it's beautiful, of course, but it isn't, I guess, as grand as this scale that's presented to us in the documentary. So I think it definitely depends on how you view spaces for different people. Thank you, Patience. Anyone else would like to share their reaction to the documentary?
In lieu of just like Black spaces and white spaces, I think when we think about environmentalism, it's interesting just to think about how the word environment, it means different things, or it can include different things depending on, what urban you're talking about. So in some cases, all the places she was running were very rural, but when you hear the word urban, you can hear it in one of two ways. And that's usually meaning inner city people, like urban environments when you're talking about Black people, or when you're talking about Black people. So it's either like the inner city, like the metropolis vibe, or you're talking about Black people. But understanding how in both of those ways, we still don't consider an urban space, quote unquote, to be an environment in a certain type of way, and how that is another way to marginalize people of color in this environmental conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes me, you talked about this earlier about this idea of urban conservation, right? And it's just like to conserve not only the urban area, because that's largely where inner city as far as this urban, that's where a lot of Black people reside. But then you'll also have this notion to where people that are, I guess, people of color that are in the inner cities aren't really welcome into spaces where they don't belong, I guess, where they don't fit in, quote unquote. They're not really welcome into areas especially if it's like largely downtown, you'll get a lot of pushback. I remember when I was in New York, we were out in a club, Lower East Side, where a lot of people are, and we went to a space near. I don't want to call out the college, but we were on the Lower East Side. If you're familiar with New York, then you know what I'm talking about. And we went to a club, and people were telling us, "Oh, just go back to Brooklyn," yelling and shouting at us. So it's definitely interesting what people consider urban conservation. Are they talking about just the city area? Are they talking about Black culture in general? So that is a great point, Candace. Thanks. Is there anyone else that would like to share? Okay, so we're gonna move forward to I'm sorry. We'll move forward to the next slide. And these are just a few quotes that I found from the George Wright Forum. And it's a forum on people of color and their constraints to national park visitation. So why is there this narrative that Black people don't go to national parks? You have Tuskegee University, who is the only campus that's designated as a national historic site, right? But a lot of the times people disregard those notions. So I found this quote, and it says, people of color who venture into white spaces, including national parks, may be treated rather coolly and, not surprisingly, feel unwelcome and remain on their guard. So I want to ask the audience, what is your initial reaction to this quote? I know some of you mentioned a few points earlier. I believe I heard Isaiah say something about this quote. But does anyone else want to elaborate on basically how they feel about this quote? Is it valid? You don't have to agree with everything that we say.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is Latanya. You know, when I was growing up, lived in the city, we would I would call it the Golden Ghetto, because it was not a dilapidated ghetto, but it was a certain part of town, but you still had a little affluent people there. So our section was called the Golden Ghetto. So we still did our different trips to like we were in Chicago, went to the Chicago Arts and Science Museum, and you would always get those looks like, what are they doing here? You know, like it was a true, like we didn't belong there. You know, but we're interested in other places and curious about different places as everyone else, but you did get those looks, and it did not make you feel welcome. You know, so you just learned to ignore it and just dug in deeper into your books. For example, I like to go to museums, and you know, all kinds of museums. But you know, they just have a way of making you feel uncomfortable if you allow that to happen to you. But as you grow older, then you find your niche, you decide what you want to do, and you throw that off and you keep going, and your curiosity gets better, and you want to learn more, and you will. You know,
yes, I agree. Be resilient. That's what I heard. Be resilient. Don't give up. Even although they may make you feel uncomfortable, you have to withstand, because they're always going to look at you differently.
Like I was a Girl Scout, you know, this is back in the 60s and 70s, and we did have an all-Black troop, but like when we went to the campgrounds or whatever, they just sort of looked at us, you know. Mm-hmm. But we had all our badges. We did everything. It's like they made you feel like you did not belong. You know, so I just strove on and got as much education as I could to be able to compete, mm-hmm. you know, with these people that looked at you like this. But, you know, I was always an avid reader, you know, it's just interesting. But, you know, like when I moved from Indiana to the South, you know, it's more rural. And like my daughter was like the only Black person in this 4-H group here in LaGrange. So I took her out and let her join the one at Tuskegee so she could at least be with her, you know, some people of her color.
Wow.
You know, so we experienced all of that. And this is over a period of 20, 30 years, 40 years when I go back to myself. So it's changing slowly but surely, but now it looks like we're trying to go backwards. So I just don't know what to think. It's interesting.
Yeah, policing and environmental racism is real. I'm sure that's gonna come up. Ryan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hey.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, hey. I was just sitting here thinking I had joined the chat pretty late, and so I missed a lot of the film. But I was thinking, just like reprogramming, and I think that for me, coming from Los Angeles, California to the South, you know, I hadn't even been in a space where there was so much like land or where there was forest. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like that was like the first time I actually saw stars, like a full sky of stars before in my life. And that wasn't until I was 17 years old. So I think that like I know somebody was touching on like environments and having access to certain places. And I think that like when I say like reprogramming, just like telling yourself it's okay to go out and run. It's okay to do things in nature and being comfortable with that when you've never really kind of had that opportunity before. So I don't know. I thought it was actually kind of cool how the girl started off as a track runner, and she started running in nature. And I think that, I guess, like a solution to expand these spaces so that we can see more Black faces is probably going to, you know, other athletes and, you know, talking to them about it, you know, and like, because a lot of athletes, you know, enjoy being outside. So maybe they could make that connection. So that's what I was thinking.
No, yeah, that's a great point. And this discussion is for us to be solutions oriented. So we are going to discuss like what are ways that we can combat those narratives. And just like you said, reprogramming the way that we think and the way that we perceive nature, and then also other people's perception of us, right? They have to do the work themselves in order to
get used to it. Gotta get used to it.
Yes. So for the sake of time, we're gonna move on to the next quote, but it's definitely within this same ballpark. Many people of color have noted that they routinely encounter acts of discrimination on site or during their travels, which negatively impact their enjoyment and subsequent behavior. So I believe
Amen.
Yeah, so like when you don't feel welcome, then you don't go. Does anyone want to comment on this?
Well, I've been in many instances like this. I just throw it off my back and just, if they stare at me, I stare at them back. Then I ignore them. I get my book out, you know, and just ignore them. You know, I just let them know, okay, so now you see me, your novelty is off. You know, a lot of times they expect us to look dusty and rough and be unruly. You know, you can look just nice as they can and act very, very becoming to whatever the situation is, but they just expect us to act they have us so stereotyped, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely understand that for sure. So how does this quote impact you? Does anyone feel like it's valid or it's not valid?
I feel it's valid. Very valid.
I definitely think it's a lot of validity there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree.
And if we think about it, we have all experienced it at some point or another throughout our lives.
Yeah, for sure. I someone actually shared an experience earlier. I believe it was Kayla, that where she people kind of like looked at her and was like, "Oh, you're hiking. You know what you're doing." You know. So I think those different, I guess, microaggressions can discourage people from wanting to join or do anything differently.
It's still stereotyping, isn't it?
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
The word travels even makes me think about like the Green Book, for example, and like I'm watching Lovecraft Country and seeing how that really kicked off the show, is like knowing where you can stop and where you can't stop. So in a lot of ways, how much of the country, was really cut off to us at a certain point in time, and I think that lingering feeling or that lingering policy around us not being welcome still exists in those spaces in a lot of ways. So what we're feeling could be and sometimes when we're out in nature and things like that is those policies and those mindsets that are still lingering in a lot of ways. And even when you travel now, there are still certain places that I'm not going to stop my car unless I see a crowd of people. And then if it's not the right crowd of people, I'm definitely not going to stop. I will keep it pushing just because, you know, it's also being practical and wanting to feel safe and my sense of security.
Mm-hmm. But also with the emergence of all these fringe groups that has come to light now, that we're hearing about, have been around for a long time. These fringe groups are becoming more emboldened, and you know, and unless it gets under control, it's going to be interesting. You know, so
what do you mean by fringe groups? What do you mean by fringe groups?
I'm talking about the fringe groups of today, like Al-Anon and what is this group that's out there today? What is the Proud Boys? All these different fringe groups that has come to light within the last couple 2-3 years. This is dealing with politics now.
Yeah, this is Kayla Peterson. I've heard of, I know, LaTanya, what you're talking about. I've heard of a couple groups within the ultra-conservative, alt-right groups.
Yes.
It kind of differs within the internet chat rooms or different.
So not white supremacist groups.
But you can watch CNN and MSNBC is on every day now.
Yeah.
You know, all the pundits are talking about these groups. So they're out there full force. So it makes it a little more scarier to venture into places where you really want to go.
Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're gonna move to the last and final quote, which is, researchers have documented that white managers of parks, forests, and wilderness areas often assume that the majority of visitors are whites. So interpretive exhibits and stories in these areas tend to predominantly celebrate white Americans' histories and heritages. Stories and contributions of people of color are often ignored or distorted. And I believe Dr. Shange had mentioned this exact point earlier. So what is your initial reaction to this quote in regards to how Black people's stories are often ignored or distorted, or the spaces being solely created to make whites comfortable?
It's all that. That's all those things that you combine together. It's all those things. Mm-hmm.
I absolutely agree with the quote because I think that sometimes white people feel uncomfortable when you talk about the Black history of us, and putting it out there in museums and stuff like that can make them feel very uncomfortable because it's an uncomfortable conversation for them, but it's history for us that needs to be shown and discussed. And it just makes them feel uncomfortable. So I can see how those things are just shown to make them feel better or feel
superior.
Yeah, and that's one reason why you really only see those kinds of exhibits in those type of environments, versus you have to go to a Black exhibit or a Black museum to see the full potential of our history. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, so much of our history has been stolen. You know, like some of the inventions we had, you know, were stolen by other people and they took credit for it. You know, all this is coming out more and more now. You know, so much is we've been deprived as a people. So we're trying, I guess, to redefine our space, where we are or where we want to go. But, you know, everything has to come to light because a lot of this that's happened down through the years is systematic.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess that actually, wait, before I move on, does anyone else want to comment on this actual quote?
Yeah, I do. So what are the common stereotypes of, I'm going to quote on a question. What are common stereotypes of Black people in outdoors? So one thing that I came across when I was in my dissertation studies was this idea of poverty environment connection. And it was some scholars that were making the argument that the more poor you are, the more that you contribute to environmental degradation, right? And
Wow.
we know that is not the case at all, you know. And we know our people have a long and incredible history with the environment, whether you're talking about pre or post transatlantic trade, right? And one of the things that I would even say, and may touch on the last question, I mean, we're talking about national parks and historic sites and things like that. I mean, like one of the things, connection to the nature and the environment is navigation, right? If we're talking about the Underground Railroad, I mean, that's an incredible connection to the land that a people have, right? And that's something that, within our own communities, we speak about. But now, as we're kind of at this crossroads in the nation about where we're going to go, but I mean, if you really want to make an inclusive society, include all people, you need to highlight all peoples in the environment. And that's why I did bring up that issue about heritage in the environment. I think it's
Dr.
almost...
Shangay, that makes us, with the Underground Railroad, that make us survivalists for real, right? From the beginning. We survived all of that.
Absolutely. And that connection to the land and to the earth is something that, you cannot separate our people from whatsoever.
You can't. And then also regenerative practices, that's going back to us, to traditional agriculture, to Black people, things that they call backward, barbaric. They're going back to things, in the name of sustainability, they're going back to traditions that we've created. And if you continue to tune into RTTU, you'll hear a lot about regenerative agriculture, especially for our big event next year. So thank you, Dr. Shangay, for that.
And a shameless plug to anybody that has any nieces, nephews, sons, daughters, cousins that are interested in nature and the environment, I would say send them to you. But if you can't, look for a local 1890.
Okay, we're a land grant institution. Amen. I would say send them to TU, of course.
There you go.
Here y'all go.
Hey, my daughter finished here. I made her go.
So it's for the sake of time. Oh, I'm sorry, Candace, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make one more comment, like, because when we were talking earlier, something that was interesting to me about the stereotypes is how at one point it's stereotype like, oh, we shouldn't be out in nature, that we don't belong out in nature, but for example, when we are out in nature, or when we do get outside in the ways that we can, for example, like sitting on the stoop, chilling on the porch, going to the park, it's called loitering or soliciting or being a porch monkey. So the stereotypes they kind of follow us no matter where we try to go outside. Amen. And so figuring out ways to navigate that and figuring out how we can enjoy the outdoors, whether we're in a rural setting or an urban or an inner city or urban setting, without being, scared for our lives on one capacity and, being called racial slurs or porch monkeys in the next, like figuring out that balance. Or do we just not care and find and create our own safe spaces?
I'll go with the latter. We can create our own safe spaces, okay?
That's only ignore it so much, right?
Created.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's a great segue into, I'm sorry, did someone else want to comment?
It was me.
Oh, go ahead.
I was thinking about like it made me think about controlling like the rhetoric. Mm-hmm. The one thing I did notice about the documentary, even though I didn't watch it that long, it was like one Black person and she was mixed. And you just can't tell me that there is not one Black person. Like, and so I don't know, like I think just controlling our rhetoric and just, like, instead of having the person behind the camera be white, have the person behind the camera be black, you know, or have more black people in front of the camera, so that could be kind of like an inspiration to, you know, the next generation of black kids growing up. So
That's a
Oh,
good
I
point.
definitely agree. And I think that's a great segue into our solutions oriented approach. So we wanted these discussions to not just be about us talking about our woes, right? So we want to create alternatives, create solutions. So how do we debunk these myths? Like, what are some ways that we as Black people can shift the narrative in our favor to be truthful and also truthful of our character, to actually represent our values and morals instead of just a whole bunch of crap that they created and put together just to make us feel inferior and just for other cultures to feel like our culture is inferior. So
We're always on the defensive. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about this so I'm of Caribbean descent, and a big issue is that agriculture and working with the land has very painful ties to slavery for a lot of people. So farmers and the farming industry in general is not respected as a viable profession, as something that's worth something. And over 80% of the produce in the Caribbean is imported. And I think that's crazy. And I feel like something that I've been thinking about as a solution is kind of rethinking that, like removing ourselves from needing to feel that, oh, being outside means that, or getting dark in the sun, you know, is indicative of poverty, or because I work the land, that means that I don't have money. And reframing that as we are rich, we are blessed because we have this knowledge and we're able to work the land, and kind of refiguring that relationship of how we look at farming and how we look at farmers as viable people in our supply chain and in economic stability and self-sufficiency.
Exactly. Like, they wanted us because we knew what we were doing. That's why we were brought here in the first place, because we knew exactly how to connect with the land. And like I said before, regenerative practices is just going back to our heritage, to African heritage. So I definitely agree with you, Patience, for sure.
I agree as well. We're just 4 generations away from slavery, and it's just ingrained. You know, our ancestors worked so hard in the land, and they were beaten and for whatever indentured service, all that, and they wanted better for their children. That's why they wanted them to go to school, not have to work so hard on the land. So it's ingrained that they want you to get away from that, man. So you have to turn that issue around. You know, so that's what I heard from my grandparents. And my grandparents came running up here away from being lynched in 1927. I want all of my children to be educated and not have to work the land. So this is what I heard as I was growing up. Better yourselves, get out of here, you know. So you have to turn that idea around so that it's positive.
Yes, that's a great point. A lot of people do hear it all the time.
4 generations away from slavery, that's all that we are. So it's ingrained, it's deeply ingrained in some of us. And that's another issue.
On a positive note, I have noticed a lot of people are kind of like joining the movement in regards to like food security. I've seen a lot of people try to incorporate community gardens where they are. And then more importantly, we have to consider that a lot, because like you said, the Great Migration, right? Fleeing the Jim Crow South, a lot of Black people, they left and they moved to these inner cities. So there isn't much land to till or to farm in these inner cities, right? So I think this notion of us creating these community gardens, and also of just dialogue on how people can eat healthier and live a healthier lifestyle is very important. And I do see kind of like a difference. I do see more of a movement, I would say. I do see these things happening. Does anyone else have any other? I heard reprogramming the way that we think, right? Our mindset. I heard basically resilience. Does anyone else have any other solutions oriented approaches that how can we get more Black people in farming, right? I love farming. Candace loves farming. Dr. Shange loves farming. How can we get more Black people in farming, more Black people conscious of what they eat and what they
I was just gonna say, well, at least here in California, like since the pandemic has been like happening, I feel like a lot of people are wanting to become more aware of what they put into their body, like because they're in the house and they're like, okay, like, not a lot of people, there's a lot of people who have lost their jobs, who don't have like access to these things. So there are a lot of people in my community alone that has been like, giving like natural produce and, like opening up these opportunities for people to become a part of a community garden. So I definitely see some solutions here in California, well, in the LA area. So.
And that's awesome. Oh, go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was trying to speak.
Hey everyone, this is Kara. I came in late to the call. This is amazing.
Hey, Kara, you went out. We heard you.
Kara, no.
Oh, hey, I'm back. I was saying thanks. I came in late, so excuse me if something that I'm about to say has already been said. But this is a great conversation that is going on. And I wanted to say, as far as solutions, I don't know if we're talking about big farming and really becoming a farmer, but a lot of people who know me know that I have a garden in my backyard. And I think that sometimes starting small is something that makes it manageable. And it's a lot of time that I get to spend with my mother or my father because he built it for me. So my solution would to get people at least started in knowing, the pride of growing something is kind of how Tuskegee had the land, had the idea of this is how you can create your own housing step by step. If we could have some type of pamphlet that had a step by step of how you can create your own raised garden or your own chicken shed or whatever it could be, and it doesn't take a lot of money, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it's something that can be reused year after year, like as I'm doing with mine. I think that's a wonderful way to just get people started. And then also knowing that when you plant that seed, you're introducing institutions like Tuskegee University that, not everyone has to be a doctor or a lawyer. You can go to school for this, and it's something that you already enjoy. And so I think that when people think of college or higher education, they're thinking about certain jobs, engineer, architect, something like that. But they're not thinking of, I could be a farmer even though I go to, a 4-year institution. So those were two of my things that just popped into my head. And again, thanks everybody. I'm gonna hop off again. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Woods. I'm sorry. Those are great points. And that's mainly what we've been discussing. Just how can we get more people outdoors, if it's involved in farming, if it's involved in hiking, seeing wildlife in general. Just how can we change this narrative of Black people don't go outside, I guess. So this has been a wonderful conversation, and we are a little over. It's 7:11. So thanks everyone for their comments. And before we go, I wanted to give the mic over to Candace and Dr. Shange. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say another solution that we can all look forward to. Yay! Almost every week upcoming, we're going to start doing the Too Fast podcast. Is coming back. So our Earth to TU series. You see, this is going to be recorded, so we greatly appreciate you all being interactive and sharing your opinions, because we had people checking in from LA, people checking in from Texas, people checking in from Alabama. I'm in Chicago, so we're all over the place, and to be able to bring these unique perspectives to the table is really what Earth to TU is all about, right? Earth is a big place, but we all still have to connect and work together because we all live here. So I hope that you all definitely get on Instagram, follow us at Too Fast Tuskegee, 2 FAS Tuskegee, and you can also find the Too Fast podcast, 2 FAS podcast, on all streaming platforms. And shameless plug, you can also check out CISC181.com and farm-plug.com, because we get into the money. Dr. Shange, you got some things you want to...
Shameless.
Oh yeah, we at all. We put the work in. Dr. Shange, I know you got some shout outs.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, at least from my end, I just want to encourage everybody. If you've got some young people, and I think one of our sisters definitely mentioned it about the babies, and direct them in the right way. I mean, so anything that a child can be fascinated with in nature, right? They can make a career out of it. There's a brother, I think he's at Clemson. I think Lanham is his last name. And I think Dr. Fareed, shout out to Dr. Rashida Fareed here at TU, wildlife ecologist, who's definitely, I would believe, a leader in that area, and definitely get some of our collegiates back involved with nature as she does camping trips and things like that. But, anything that these young folks can get interested in. Shout out to Ms. Braxton and our internship team for Champion Excerpt, which is one of the ways that we're trying to lead our young folks back into nature as well. And I would just say, let the young folks explore, because at the end of the day, and that's the thing, even with the folks that went up north, I mean, as we were, I would say, forced migrants or refugees, my parents even worked blueberry fields in New Jersey before me, and didn't allow me to get out there like that. But eventually we moved out to the rural areas of New Jersey, and I learned this other way of being for our folks, and led me back down here to some of these programs. I mean, don't hide it from our young people. I mean, they will definitely take it to the next level. So let's expose. Thank everybody for being on. Thank you so much. This was wonderful, Candace and Monyai. I look forward to our future discussions. Also, shout out to Dr. Elefandi, who's on the line, who's a climate scientist. Also, another place that we want to funnel some of our young people.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us.
I enjoyed it.
Great. I'm so glad that you liked it. Please stay tuned and monitor your emails. We will be sending updates, and we are going to send out a survey. And we please complete the survey. We just want to measure outcomes. And also, thanks again for you guys joining this call. And hold on one second, because I feel like I'm supposed to say something else. Oh. Okay, but so thank you guys once again, and also stay in tune for, we have TU Tuesday coming up, and then our next Movie Monday will be in October. I'm sorry. Our next Movie Monday will be in October, probably at the end of October, kind of like this one. So, but you will receive more information in your emails, and I just want to thank everyone for giving us this time tonight, and I will let you all go.
Yes, and if there's anybody who if you all have some announcements based on where you are, any virtual programs or anything that you want to just shamelessly plug, go ahead, and now's the time, because we're virtual, but we're still building a community, right? Normally we'd be on campus or something, but this is a unique opportunity to extend beyond that. So, if you all want to put your social medias in the chat, and then that way people can follow each other, because obviously this is something we care about. So let's build this community and carry the conversation on. And also remember, you can always use the hashtag Earth2TU as well.
Yeah, I have to plug my Twitter. It's new, and I don't have any followers, so follow me.
Yes, and register to vote. That's right. Register to vote. We got some people letting us know what to do Follow with Audacity. Yes,
Oh,
with
yes.
Audacity.
And please fill out your census.
Yes, the
They
census.
extended the
short.
deadline for census. Yes, with
That's right.
Audacity, with Dr. Radliff and Dr. Woods. They just graduated from Tuskegee earlier this year. They are
Yay.
right.
inspiration to me. So please follow with Audacity. It's a dope podcast. And they talk about everything with Audacity. Okay.
That's right. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it the big way with Audacity. Shout out Camper K, right? Coming all the way from Austin, Texas, right? That's what's up. We appreciate y'all. Somebody, Jasmine said, amazing segment, and that the intergenerational interactions are ideal to create sustainable solutions. Yes. Foster the creativity. Yes. This is what we need.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if nobody has any announcements, any other announcements,
I'm gonna end it. I think I can end it. I think I have.
You got the power.
Yeah, I think I have the power to do it.
We
all
will
right.
see
Good
you
night,
all
everybody.
soon.
Be safe. Wear your mask.
Oh, be considerate.
Be blessed.
Okay. Come on.